Hello and welcome to today's SGIA webinar, Leading the Technology Curve in Web to Print. My name is Dan Marks. I'm SGI's Director of Content Development, and I'll be the moderator for today's program. On behalf of SGI, I'd like to welcome you and let you know our webinar system allows you to ask questions through your computer. So if you have questions at any time, even now, feel free to submit them and we'll get to them at the end of the formal presentation. Before we get started, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Ruben Ben Jesus, who is Director of Business Development with RACAD Tech, and he's going to tell us today about some web-to-print opportunities. So, Ruben, welcome.
Thank you, Dan, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So, as Dan mentioned, I'm part of RACAD Tech. RACAD Tech is a web development company made of individuals who have been programming since the introduction of the internet in the late 90s. We have serviced a diverse client base over 20 years, ranging from online banking, fraud screening, online marketing, UI optimization, and such. RACAD has several flagship technologies displayed here for the print and graphics industry, making them one of the most flexible and affordable solutions today, namely the formerly the e-Power system, the Go e-Power system, which is now sectioned off into two systems. One is the Web2Print Cloud, most commonly for B2B, and the Web2Print Shop. Our print-related customers include a wide array of companies that span across the entire spectrum of the print industry, including print brokers, quick printers, commercial printers, trade printers, textile manufacturers, print implants, which are in the healthcare sector, banking, and education sector. So just to give you that, some of the background, but we're here because web to print is a big deal. So anyone here is either perhaps a vendor of web to print and looking for new technology ideas, or in the print space and looking for some solutions. And certainly web to print is an essential part of the equation in print today. So we will be giving away some of our trade secrets to either help you either improve your solution if you're a vendor, or to find a solution that will allow you to improve your offering and improve your business. So as you can see here, what you have is a forecast from Keypoint Intelligence, an info trend study in 2018 that forecasts that the compounded annual growth rate of web to print is 5.2% and growing to $48 billion by 2021. In an SGIA benchmarking report that they did last year as well, they sent out some surveys, and the respondents indicated that the company website was probably the most essential factor in attracting new customers. So you can see that it's almost unanimous among all the respondents at 93%. So your website is an essential equation to your business, and therefore you want to leverage your website and maximize its ability to monetize your customers. Here in a second survey, or a second aspect of the survey, they asked what is the primary focus and management strategy to improve internet presence. Is number one on the list. But I want to also point out that the second one on the list, which is the focus to maximize the value of current customers at 62%, is actually a case for web to print as well. And I'll explain that shortly. Because what web to print does is it gives you a captive audience. So you hook your customers with their items that are frequently ordered. So traditionally speaking, web to print was a B2B solution where you would give your corporate customers a private portal for them to order frequently ordered items. And once you have that captive audience, you can actually plug in or additional upsell products. So take this example on the next slide. Yeah, here's an example of an online order for a personalized t-shirt. Yeah, here, having selected the product that I wish to order and applied my personalization on it, yeah, so you can see I've got my name there on that shirt, and it's got all these sorts of colors. When I click the continue button, instead of taking me to some checkout area where it's sending me to is an upsell area, asking me if I want to add additional items to my order. So this is brilliantly done because it's got all these different products. It's not, some of them may not even be related, and even the personalization on that product is different because you can see on that wine glass that it took my original design. Obviously, it applied it in a way that looks like it's engraved or painted onto the glass in a unique way, and asked me if I want it. So I can do that across all these different products. So I think it's a brilliant way and to make the case for web to print in a product that takes no in a way that takes no extra effort on the end user's part. Vistaprint does a great job of these type of things as well, and I'm sure it factors into a substantial amount of sales. So what are the benefits of web to print? Well, like we explained, you can upsell easily, and regardless of how long your shop is open, your web to print solution is open 24/7. Your shop is limited by your geographic location. Your web to print solution is accessible anytime and anywhere. So web to print can manage your workflow, improve your tracking, your reporting, your accountability. Web to print can present new products and services to established audiences. And most importantly, it stabilizes your book of business by making your print business a sellable asset and not just relying on your personal relationships, because that's not a sellable asset like a web to print system can be. Your web to print system can track who your customers are, track what kind of activity is going on, and can prove it to a prospective buyer. In an industry study that we did ourselves some time ago, we tried to evaluate the web to print space, and we set out a bunch of questions. One of them was, what are the pain points? And the respondents indicated that the biggest frustrations that they have with their web to print solutions are the following. 1, long implementation times. 2, inflexibility of the solution. 3, lack of proper service and support. You can see actually that the issue here is not actually money, but rather time. It takes a lot of time to research the right solution. It takes time to invest in setting up that solution. And the last thing you want to do is have them wasted all that time. The good news is, both for people in the print industry that don't have a solution yet, is that 50% of the industry does not have a solution yet. And for vendors in the space who are selling solutions, you still have the 50% of the industry that's still, available to buy it. That was one interesting part of the study that we found. The other one is that the average median spend for web to print is $16,000 a year. That's an annual number. So it's actually quite high, in my opinion. And the advice garnered here today will probably be bringing this number down over the years to come. So as far as anybody interested in entering a space these days, you can actually stay competitive in your industry and pay less money doing it than some of your contemporary printers. So let's go with what is web to print. Web to print is the web interface that delivers a print order from somewhere on the web to a print service provider. So methods can include email, FTP, standard e-commerce systems. More sophisticated technologies could include things like online custom stores, fancy upload technology, online book builders, design editors, product personalization features, and so on. On the subject, I actually remember seeing what I thought was a ridiculous article by some web to print expert on different forms of web to print, and the conclusion that the author came to was that the most popular web to print form or method was email, and the author was probably right. I remember thinking it was ridiculous when I saw it, but here's the thing. How is that order being processed? How is it being managed? How is it being tracked? Is there any reporting that you can make thereof? Is there any way you can leverage it? Is there any analytics that you can apply to orders that take place on email? So we took a simple idea like email, created an application for one of our biggest clients whereby their customers can simply email an order in. That email comes in to our system and it actually gets recorded and becomes part of the sale mix. So here you can see what I'm talking about. I obviously had to lack lot of it out, but a simple email form like this is actually what I'm talking about. So this gets recorded onto our web-to-print system. The results for this customer started off with a business that requires 3 separate web-to-print systems, yielding a total of less than 1 million orders annually on their web-to-print. Now they're pumping over 5 million orders a year, and this is no small part of the equation. Funny enough, after this, after we developed this, we got contacted by a company that had previously spent easily 6 digits on an enterprise server with one of the massive web-to-print companies, and they asked their provider for a simple solution like this, thinking it was actually original. And for some reason, and I don't know the technical details of why, but they could not provide something like this. So we actually had this in place already. We showed it to them. They were quite floored. Anyway, moving on. Web-to-print replaces the traditional order method. Yeah, so someone would obviously be sitting on their computer at home or in their office, create a file. They would come in, submit that file one way or another. The printer would produce a copy for proofing, send it back, and if anything goes wrong, then steps 3 and 4 would have to be repeated over and over until finally the printer gets an approval. The job goes through production, and then that customer can pick up and pay it. Yeah, with web-to-print, yeah, you can visit an online portal, visit an online store, select the products that you want, modify them accordingly, proof it online, confirm the order, pay for it, and then it's delivered to you, and you never really had to leave your seat. So there are probably 3 tiers of investments in web-to-print. The first one, let's say, is proprietary web-to-print. Proprietary web-to-print is traditional web-to-print, whereby, proprietary web-to-print is when a print company spends their own resources to create their own solution internally. Now, these are modest numbers. Yeah, let's assume that they find a guy, a programmer that they can pay $60,000 full-time salary on, right? And I think those are modest numbers. Aside from that full-time salary, you have the ongoing hardware concerns. You have the infrastructure, ongoing infrastructure concerns as well, such as hosting and security. And then you have the issue of what's most likely the case as things evolve, of junk code written on top of junk code and no time to rewrite the system because you have too few people and it's not worth your while to expand it out. So there are very few companies that can actually kind of afford that model. But assuming you're on the conservative side of things, you're easily spending at least $300,000 a year over the course of 5 years. And again, that's incredibly modest. You're likely spending a lot more than that. Companies in that space would be, people like Vistaprint, Cinelight, a lot of the promo companies are in that space. So it's not usually sensible for everybody to go down this route, which is why they'll go down to a licensed system. So they'll use a traditional web-to-print system, which is built for the, the broad public. And in this case, you could be paying anywhere from $10,000 up front to $100,000, paying 18 to 25% annual support fees. And then very often, you're actually paying a full-time person who understands how to operate the thing. And so you're getting close to $300,000 over the course of 5 years. And again, that could be modest. They're probably more in range, though, than the first example. So companies in that space would be some of the ones you see here. Ironically, however, despite the amounts of money that were pumped into the systems at this level, a lot of these companies are either extinct or have transitioned into other solutions, and some of them are still rather expensive. Modern web-to-print, however, you could probably get away with paying a few $1,000s on the service, on the setup, and a few $100s a month, maybe in a range of $13,000 to $21,000 over the course of 5 years, well below the $16,000 average spent yearly by what seems to be, based on our market research, the average today. And here are some of the companies that I find, obviously, that are doing this and in this level. Now, over the course of our history, we found that 50% of the customers that came to us, of our onboarded customers, were requesting some form of customization. So throughout our first decade, this proved to be a very challenging barrier to new client acquisition. And so how can we accommodate new clients if every second customer needed something that was either moderately or massively different than what was the generic offer? And that's the nature of what we're going to be talking about today. So our answer was open source technology. Open source technology is software that makes the source code available to be inspected, modified, and or enhanced, and it's available to the public, and it's out there for anybody to access. Source code are parts of the software that the software users never see. They are the invisible instructions that are a part of every software program that makes it work. Programmers that have access to source code can improve the way a program works. There are communities of programmers out there that are contributing to everyone's knowledge of programming by making their code available and saving their community of friends precious time. There are millions of open source projects available, to which maybe 500,000 are actually relevant because code eventually gets outdated. Now, here's the advantages and disadvantages to open source code versus proprietary. Proprietary is code that's locked up in a box that only the software vendor has access to, and traditional web to print fits in that box. Open source means that there's code out there that people are sharing that maybe you can leverage, perhaps, for your web to print solution. So these would be the trade-off in going one way versus the other. Open source code is accessible to the public, so everybody has access to it. Proprietary code, on the other hand, is only available to the licensor or the vendor. Open source, on the other hand, has massive developer communities that are contributing to the code, whereas proprietary code is limited to the development staff of your company that you're selecting to service you. So if you can find an open source solution, theoretically speaking at this point, then potentially you have tens of thousands, or who knows, millions of developers that you can draw upon to solve your issues, contribute to your code. Now, open source is generally free, but take that with a grain of salt because things do cost money. Yeah, things take time, and time is money. Whereas proprietary is generally costly. Open source is generally a do-it-yourself type of model. They try to make it intuitive. There's a lot of literature around what you're going to be adopting in open source, or there should be. Whereas on the proprietary side, training is generally required for a software. There's minimal literature. Sometimes also the rate at which code is being developed, the literature doesn't catch up always at the same rate. In open source, if you adopt an open source solution, you can actually maximize your ownership. But in proprietary, you don't have that luxury. You have minimal ownership. So if you're going down the road of proprietary with a proprietary vendor, and we are one of those type of people as well, come the day that you stop paying your license fees, that solution gets turned off and all your data is lost. If you're on an open source solution where you built your own solution, potentially, then you can maximize your ownership and the data stays with you. In proprietary solutions, you're limited with what the alternatives are for customizations, and there's costly plugins. In the open source world, there are a lot of affordable plugins, easy hooks and quick customizations on the open source side, and then on the proprietary side, it takes a lot of time to develop the things that need to be done to accommodate on the proprietary side. So those are actually all advantages, I guess, that open source would have potentially over proprietary code. The downside of open source is because it's available to the entire world, it's exploitable. So you have access to it, so does everyone else. And if anyone else can see what they want, or can see that code, they can try and exploit it. Whereas proprietary is locked in a box, it's not exposed to people, so it's usually less exploitable. The other thing is the open source is made for the general public and not the niche specific. whereas proprietary software is made for the niche specific. So in our industry, print is actually a very, very different beast compared to most small, medium businesses out there. And therefore, there's very little that you can find that will be the perfect solution on open source. However, there are things out there, and we're going to cover a little bit of that. Before we do, though, let's go to address a more fundamental level. Here what you have is code in the world at large. So this is all different forms of software code that are in use today. If you're building technology from scratch, you want to obviously use the right language for the right job. So here at RACAD, for example, we're a bit spoiled because we are code agnostic and we can swing any way. But not everybody has that luxury. You want to build where the talent is and use skill sets that are easily found and easily replaceable. So you don't want to use some sort of source code that's very few people know about. So you see that there's a major popularity in Python, but it's popular these days due to a trend in development of machine learning. C++ is popular in things like video games, installed applications, toys, etc. For web, PHP used to be very popular, but nowadays perhaps you would be inclined to anything from the JavaScript family, such as Electron, Node.js, which runs on all operating systems and allows you to use your designs as HTML. There's a JS version known as Electron that's backed by GitHub and has it's a mix of C++, JavaScript, Object-C, and Python. You have Node.js, which is written in C, C++, and JavaScript, obviously. You have AngularJS, which is backed by Google, React.js, which is backed by Facebook, and both are more or less the same. They build user interfaces. They're optimal for fetching large amounts of data, as you can imagine. And up and coming on the rise is .NET Core, which is the open source version of C# and can run under any operating system for all web services related to coding. But that's for anybody who's at that level. For people, for the vast majority of people, there's no need to develop from scratch. The open source communities develop a lot of common features that are fundamental to all systems. Therefore, you need not develop solutions that have things like user accounts, account history, e-commerce, payment gateways, and shipping, etc. Those are all things that you can find in the open source systems that share these commonalities. So as a developer, you don't necessarily need to develop these common features. You only need to focus on the differentiating factors such as document editing, file uploading technology, book building, personalization technology, and things like that. And so to that effect, I introduce you to open source content management systems. Now, the good news is that there are many solutions to choose from. The bad news is that there are many solutions to choose from. So how do you determine what solutions to focus on? So in our research some years ago when we started entering this space, we figured to follow the majority, and it is your best bet against obsolescence, because the last thing you want to do, as our initial pain points indicated, is invest in a technology that, one, is going to take you a lot of time, and then come tomorrow and it's obsolete. So just to give you a quick summary of our journey in this space, I think we did some research back in 2012. You can easily research the solutions that are best for you and quantify your budget and plow forward. Our focus on development was on WordPress based on some of the research that we did. So you can see here in 2012, WordPress powered 26.6% of all the websites in the world, right? So that's, at the time there were about 1 billion websites in the world. So that's 260 million websites out there. And as far as the, so that's the indication of that gray bar, right? That's 26.6 here. And then you have the green bar, which represents WordPress's market share among other CMS platforms. So you can see that it towers above all the other ones. So when we went down the road of trying to also accommodate the open source market and technologies for print customers that we might encounter in the future, so we went down the road of WordPress at the time because of its towering above everyone else. Other benefits in WordPress was the fact that they offer 44,000, at the time offered 44,000, over 44,000 plugins. So any little piece of code that you might need to supplement, the platform itself, there's no shortage of people contributing to it. You had 1.2 billion plugin downloads, so it's not going to go obsolete anytime soon. And there were over 50 translations of WordPress. So it was a good, probably a good choice to develop for WordPress. And anybody who's not in the space yet, probably a good choice as well. Now that was then. I did an update of my knowledge to see where we're at these days. So to date, right now, WordPress now powers 34.2% of the websites in the world. That, with the amount of websites there are today, which is 1.7 billion, that's 581 million websites that WordPress is powering. They have 60.9% market share of the open source CMS platforms in the space, and over 50,000 WordPress plugins to date, 1.25 billion plugin downloads, and again, a bunch of translations. There are probably more than there were originally, but I couldn't find some data on that recently. But I want to point out something else now. One of the things that we called in the previous, this is the 2012 study, notice that Shopify is down here at the bottom, towards the bottom. So we had done research actually across a lot of the major content management systems at the time. So we had looked into Magento, we had looked into PrestaShop, which were on the top 10 there, and a handful of others. We actually felt that despite the fact that Shopify was lower down, that they were up and coming, and so when we created our own implementations for open source, our top two choices at the time were WordPress and Shopify. The data most recently shown in 2019 actually shows Shopify on the number 4 position for content management systems, but they're number 2 in e-commerce systems, right after WooCommerce. This is actually an older stat, but here's the up-to-date stat, and you can see Shopify actually in the number 2 position. Right, so you see the blue is WooCommerce, the red is Shopify. And here's another stat as well. So you have WooCommerce at the top. It's a couple years old, but it's only stronger now. And Shopify in the number 2 position, and Magento actually sliding down. So they actually have they're actually totally different. WordPress from Shopify, for example. And obviously Magento too. We found with Magento, when we were looking into it at the time, we felt it was a bit sloppy, the literature, and it seemed to be, at least to us, that anybody who had a preference in Magento was actually really, really equipped and felt equipped. So our journey was primarily down the WordPress WooCommerce road and Shopify for the following reasons. Shopify was incredibly stable, and they do what they do really well, and they convert really well as far as sales go. Their goal is to create stores for people easily and to convert easily, and to that effect, they do it really well. However, Shopify is a black box. They host the solution for you. They lock in the e-commerce to some degree that doesn't allow the kind of flexibility that printers need, and so therefore we have a mix of customers ourselves, for example, in Shopify, others in WordPress. WordPress allowing a lot more flexibility as to what you can do with it. And so that's the reason why we went down that road ourselves. Anyway, the short of it in going down this road is that to have a decent web-to-print system running for you, you need not blow a bunch of money. If you don't have it, you can easily apply cost-efficient ways to employ good technology for your company. The common features are easily accessible. So for example, if you were going down the road of WordPress, and it's no different for any content management system, it's simply as easy as downloading the WordPress application, installing it on your hosting server, and you'll be able to create a website on your server. Thereafter, you want to obviously apply a payment gateway. There we we go. So you want to apply a payment gateway. So these are all easy plugins you can find. So now you've turned your website, which was just a website with information on it, into a e-commerce website by applying an e-commerce gateway. You can do the same thing for shipping as well. So I'm just having trouble changing these slides. And then at that point, you can focus on plugins that you can that would give you that web to print capability. So there's a lot out there. These are just a splash of different companies that provide web to print plugins for WordPress and some other content management systems. And all of them will have their features. So one of the things that you want to make sure you do is you want to have a solid idea of the features that you need to run your business and look for the technologies that can assist you with those needs. The main web to print apps available for open source, if I can overgeneralize, would be what I've listed here. So you have online quotes. So this includes basic product options and more sophisticated cost-based estimators. So people in this space right now are print quotes and Quotafly, but you can get items like WooCommerce options, or Shopify will have their version of that, and Magento. There's many. That's a very popular one right there, because in print, as you know, when you're dealing with one product, you're not when you're dealing with regular e-commerce, you're selling a pair of shoes. It's $100 for one pair and $200 for two. In print, you're dealing with say business cards, or you're dealing with fabric. You change any element of the product, such as the weight, the size, the color, the finishing, etc. You're going to the quantity and the quantity breaks. So that the e-commerce aspect of that is very sophisticated. So everybody has some sort of version of what they can apply on online quotes. Then there's the ability to upload files. So there's a lot of solutions out there for that as well. And so you have PDF drivers, you have pre-flighting solutions, including book uploads and assembly. And then you have product editing or personalization. And then you have management elements. So in traditional print, you'll have MIS features and multi-level administration features, reporting, management, etc. So you narrow down your requirements, and you pick and choose the items that you want, for example, and then you can plow forward with that. So the best thing would be obviously to make a list of what those critical features are, and then be able to compare them one with the other and make your determination. So here are some critical features at work. This is an example of technology that exists right now in open source. So in this example, this is a combination of a display of product options on the right-hand side. In this example, before though you got to this, your customer is going to, well, in most classic examples, a customer will select the product and determine the features of the product and options that they want with that product. So in here, they can set, select a page size, select the type of paper that they want, select what type of binding they want, and then they'll upload their product, upload their file. That's generically found almost anywhere. In this example, however, the end user is uploading his file. That file gets detected. You can see here that there's a page count of 16 color pages, and then 0 black and white pages, and the pricing that you see here is $242 based on color pages, and then based on the number of copies a little bit higher up in the quantity area. Okay, so there are actually only 2 companies that I've seen that do this, something to this effect. That would be RACAD, which is the company I work for, and a company called Arigma, who I think is also a shining star and is on the rise. Here is an example, a common example of apparel. There are many plugins as well for these types of products. So you have, for example, WooCommerce product options, which is very popular, and that allows you to create multiple variations of the same product. So you can have, a round neck T-shirt, but in a whole slew of colors and a whole slew of sizes, and you can find very cheap plugins that can do these type of options. Here's another example of web-to-print plugin that you can find. So this is this shows two different examples. I just put them side by side. One is an HTML5 editor where you can design that mug or that thermos with a lot of flexibility, so you can select different colors. There's a lot of online editors out there. So the left is done in HTML5. On the right-hand side, it's a vector editor. And that's provided by a company called Emaxel. You can also actually create templates using Inkscape, which is also a free design technology. Here again, just a widescreen user interface for an online design technology again. So they're all very similar to each other. Again, it'll boil down to what are the features that are important to you, and obviously reliability of the company that you're getting it from. Here is an editor that allows rule-based editing. So on the left-hand side, you can see the end user is limited by their, by what they can do. So the disadvantage of this editor is the limitations, right, of their input. They're not designing with total flexibility. But the advantage is that they are limited in what they can do. And so therefore, it makes the process very goof-proof. They come, they select their product, and it's altogether intuitive. They just select, things from a drop-down. They type in, filling in the blanks. This is an editor that's provided by us as well. Also provided by a company called Print Science. It's a PDF lib editor. It's a PDF editor essentially, and it's incredibly intuitive. It's ourselves most popular editor. We have 4. We have a flexible editor and other versions as well, but this one is by far our most popular, but also because it was our longest running. On the right-hand side, it's a photo editor, and companies, there are a lot of photo plugins that you can find as well. On the right-hand side is an example of that. Sorry. Here's an example that shows off a product created in InDesign, similar in style to the one before, which is form-based, but this one is using XMPy from Xerox with the variable data. XMPy is a very powerful, although expensive tool, but it allows you to do very neat things like image-based fonts, whereby the personalization is simulated within the imagery itself, which is a very neat feat. So here, as you can see, I've got etched into the wood and of that handheld knife, my name, or in this case the company name. So that's the kind of things that you can find online for open source systems to make your system work with some common items. Now, here's just some quick. I'm just going to go through a quick sprint of the kind of things that you can get. I mean, this is Magento, which you can find on Magento. There are product options in here on Magento, very common. Like I showed you before, these are web-to-print elements in Magento that you can find. Here's Emaxel, which I showed you an example of. You'll have Brush Your Ideas, also an online designer, flexible designer. So there's a mix here that you can find. Same thing as well on Shopify. So these are upload apps on Shopify that might be able to take up files that you can use for print production. These are upload apps as well. These are web-to-print apps that you can use for online design and such. Just take this with a grain of salt. A lot of the online designers that you'll find on Shopify, sometimes they're provided by the print provider himself. And it's done as a technique to be able to get people to open up stores, brokers to open up stores, order their product and have that fulfilled for them. So obviously you don't want, unless you're a broker, you don't want that type of solution if you're doing the print production yourself. So you just have to keep an eye out for who's providing the solution. Again, as well, you have some more web-to-print apps and product editor apps as well. So the thing that you want to do, again, is get all the elements that are critical to you and create some sort of charts. So these are things that we did ourselves, just as examples. So these are comparison charts that we've done, more generalized. They're not focusing on the details of the features so much, but they are detailing some of the companies and what they have available. So on the top side of this chart is again just an example of web to print providers and some of the criteria that you might have in mind to evaluate them through. On the lower end of this, you've got some upload technology as well, providers. Here is just, again, some file transfer detection and pre-flighting providers as well. So anyone who wants to reach out and get, some information from us or from me as to what's out there, we've got to share with you. This is an example of product and pricing options. So you have WooCommerce that has their extra price fields. That's very common, very cheap, very easily applicable. And you want to see also, how many installs do they have? When are they last updated? So this is just a mix of different companies that provide these features, such as the product and pricing options. And this is just a close-up of one of them, where we compare ourselves with WooCommerce Designer. They're actually two opposite ends of the spectrum, because WooCommerce Designer is a one-time purchase for for free or for $90, whereas we obviously have some layered options that are unique to our industry, and therefore we're obviously a lot more expensive. But this is the kind of things you want to take into account, and then you obviously have to evaluate what's good for you. Pretty much that wraps up what I'm going to be offering you today. We will be speaking about this in more detail at the upcoming SGIA Printing United in October. We'll be going into more detail of setting up a website and what are the things you have to look out for, what are the questions you need to ask your provider. So I encourage you guys to come to Printing United in October, and certainly feel free to ask any questions now as well.
Okay. Ruben, thanks for the presentation. And just from my standpoint, I have a quick question here. And for me, this is kind of exposure to something I'm not that familiar with, and it's like kind of walking into a room you've never entered in your house before. And I guess for somebody who's trying to get their head around this and understand this and maybe start an e-commerce operation, what are the first 3 or 4 key steps to sort of build the company infrastructure to start doing this?
Okay, so if you're talking about building straight away, that would be a different step than what I would suggest, because people, you have to be wary of their time, and you don't want to make a decision that's going to waste your time. So it's best to somewhat have an idea of what you want first, and then just take a handful of research points that might be able to fulfill what it is your objectives are. So if you're going down the road of open source, list out what your criteria are, just to make sure that open source, first of all, is a good fit. Because again, there will be the disadvantages. If you take the decision to move forward, then it all starts with a website. It all starts with an e-commerce system and who are your shipping providers. That you can find anywhere. You can find it cheaply, and that's the bare minimum. When people want to take that next step and do things that are a bit more sophisticated, that are unique to the print space, you have to have a solid idea of what are your products that you want to offer, what are the options that you're going to offer publicly, right, to the outside world, and are you going to obviously publish your prices or not? That becomes the skeleton of your website, no matter which path you go down. My advice on that point is that you want to focus on the products that you do best, that will probably bring you the best return. Sure. Because there's all sorts of websites out there that do everything for everybody, and then nobody wants to go there because you've got Vistaprint doing that already. You've got 4over, right? So what you want to do is focus on the stuff that makes you unique, and then build out from there. Once you have that audience that's getting whatever it is, laptop wraps and phone wraps, whatever it is that you're doing, and you have their attention for what it is that you do best, but you do other things as well that are very common, so then you can upsell perhaps some of those ancillary items as well. But the skeleton of that website is your product catalog and the options you want to provide, and obviously the pricing and price breaks that may be included in that.
Okay.
And then a decision of whether you're uploading files or designing online, etc.
Very good. And obviously what I'm hearing there is sort of define the job before you purchase the tool, and figure out exactly what you want to do. And one more question, and I've seen several companies that have built a web to print branch, let's say, of their business. um, under the moniker of their core business. So if I'm XYZ Graphics, I become XYZ Graphics Online or something like that. I've also seen other companies that have started a whole different business under a different name and a different model. What have you seen in terms of the success rate of that? Is it just a different way of looking at it, or what are you seeing in that area?
Okay, so good question. So what happens a lot is that a lot of the traditional print guys out there who have a lot of solid relationships, they very often don't want to publish publicly what their pricing is,
Hmm.
but they want to compete on the web, and on the web you have to start, getting a bit aggressive on the pricing. So if they open up with their brand and their regular customers actually visit and say, hey, why are you charging me, 200% more than what you're charging online? It
Hmm.
won't work. So they actually open up a different brand and disconnect it from themselves so that they can actually reap the benefits of those relationships still. But on the other hand, leverage the web market for online orders as well. That's what we find, and that's I think the impetus for that strategy.
Okay. Well, thanks for the presentation today. We're kind of at the end of our time here. And for those of you who joined us, thanks for being here. We hope you found the presentation to be informative. I certainly did. And before we sign off, I want to urge you to register today for Printing United. It's taking place October 23rd through 25th in Dallas, Texas. It is North America's largest printing-oriented event. And Ruben is one of our presenters, and we'll be delighted to have him there doing a presentation as part of that event. So with that, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you online again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dan.